You're listening to Packers Talk Network.
PackersTalk.com.
Welcome to the Packers Weekly Podcast, part of PackersTalk.com network. I'm your host, Miles Teddick, joined by your co-host, Tim Hamilton. We are diehard Packers fans, and we just love talking about the Pack. So we're doing that every week now. We're not getting into the national sports media talking points and headlines and all that nonsense that they get into. We're just sticking with real football. We're diving into the top topics around the Pack every week, breaking down games during the season and sorting through the nonsense and the drama of the offseason, which is where we are now. So if you're
listening to Packers.
We're looping. We don't want to loop there. If you want to support the podcast, please spike that like button for us. Follow us on all the socials. Subscribe to the Packers Talk YouTube channel. Those things are very, very helpful for us and take very little effort on your part. So we would greatly appreciate it if you could help us out with that. And before we get started, a few words from our sponsor, Wisconsin's own Ticket King. For over 30 years, Ticket King has been providing Packers tickets to Packers fans. You can find them on the web at theticketking.com or visit their locations in Green Bay and Milwaukee. For direct links to specific Packers game tickets, go to packerstalk.com/tickets or browse their website at theticketking.com. Business is handled. Sir, Tim, how are you?
I am well. Happy Solar Eclipse Day. And also, I guess more importantly, happy Cooper DeJean testing day, because he finally had his pro day today. So I think that applies more to Packer fans than even the Eclipse today.
So can we have a discussion about which was more underwhelming?
The Eclipse, for sure. At least where I'm at.
No, I will say, and as I was, like I said, I was right on the edge of totality there. So I guess I don't think I could tell a difference. It looked like totality to me. But right here in the DFW area, it was like nighttime in the middle of the day. Very weird, kind of a gray experience.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so interesting enough. I didn't get any superpowers. I really thought after reading all the interesting things that people were predicting about the eclipse that I thought, something cool had to come out of it. And
nothing, huh?
Not much. Not that I can tell.
Well, you never know.
Tune in next week to find out.
Right. When you need the superpowers, that's when they seem to show up, I guess.
Yeah. So maybe that's what it'll be. Maybe I'll end up with some sort of like prediction superpowers about what the Packers are going to do. But anyway, no, we're gonna have some fun tonight. We got some Packers talk to get into, a little draft talk to get into. After all of the film study and all of the positional breakdowns and all these different things that we do, what is the dream scenario? I mean, Tim, you're the one who presented the question, and I had to kind of stop and go, I'm not sure. I don't
Fair
know.
Enough.
I didn't need to think on that one. So, yeah, we're going to talk about that. What is the dream scenario for the Packers in this draft? Certainly, if you're listening along and have access to the comments, please chime in and join us on this topic because it should be a lot of fun. We'll get into a little bit of the tight end position on this episode, although, Brock Bowers is certainly the star of the position. Is there anybody else? There might be a couple of guys. So, we'll get into those and just a few other things. We got a little bit of a reminder this week about how valuable those shares of Packers stock actually can be. So we might touch on that there for a little bit and just get into a few things. But, Tim, to get us warmed up with this draft talk here, we've gone through a lot of the positions. I've spent more time watching film on guys than I ever have, which I love having the reason to do that, having a nice, valid reason for that. But, going through all of this, the thing that's tough for me to do is ranking guys. Where do you think they'll go? Shoot, man, I just don't know. Like, I'm not the mind of a GM. We get surprises every draft about where guys go, guys fall, guys, whatever, go higher than you think. And so that part of it, I'm just like, I think by watching more film, I recognize how hard that is. And certainly glad that it's not our job to do it. So we're not even going to try. But the fun thing that comes out of that is you do end up with like your guys. So, let's start there, man. Like, who are your guys just in this draft across positions?
Yeah, so I mean, at least from my perspective, and like you were saying, like we look at what we can look at. We see the film, but we're not experts, and we certainly don't see enough film where we can even think of ourselves as being close to experts.
Right.
But we know enough, and if we saw these guys play in college, we're seeing these guys, the clips of them on the internet, whatever we're able to get access to, we're reading what the draft analysts are saying. So we do have background information that way on them.
For sure.
And I think both of us look at this largely the same way. As like, there's guys that we like, and then there's guys that we like that we think the Packers also are going to like. Right. And so like, I tend to go to that second category more because there's guys I like. That's great, but I don't want to get too excited about them, because if I don't think they're going to be guys that the Packers like, then just forget about it. I don't want to be disappointed, right? Because they're not going to take those guys. So I try to like go generally more towards, I think the Packers would like this guy, and if I like him, cool. I also look at positions that I think that are needs and that they're going to hit in the draft, where they're going to draft from. Right. That's just kind of like the way I'm looking at my perspective on it. So for me, some guys from those positions that they're going to go to. We talked about him last week. Cole Bishop, the safety from Utah. I like him a lot. I think, from what I've seen, he has the highest RAS score. Not that that's, the ultimate decider, but the highest relative athletic score for a safety in this draft class. But if you actually watch him play over the last 2 years, they use him in a bunch of different ways. They use him in the box, attacking the run. They use him in coverage. He can cover tight ends. He's used in the slot a little bit. I don't think he'll do a ton of that in the NFL. But then they also use him up high. So I think the fit with the Packers would just be really good when you have another very good safety who you're bringing in, Xavier McKinney, who I don't think they're going to stick McKinney in one spot and just say, all right, that's your spot, you play there. I think they're going to move him all over, because he's got that ability to do that. And I think Cole Bishop has that ability as well, maybe to a lesser extent. And maybe when he first starts, if he were to be picked by the Packers as a rookie, maybe you kind of find a role for him to start off with. But I think there's some ability for him and McKinney to be interchangeable, where one can be up in the box, one can be in the deep middle of the field, one can be covering a tight end at times, the other one, like they can just move them all over the field. So I really like Bishop in that way. I think he gives them a ton of versatility in the safety position, probably better, along with the athletics ability and the size, than any safety in this draft class. So Bishop's one guy. I think there's a lot of good offensive linemen, and I think there's a lot of good offensive linemen who are tackles who maybe he'll have to kick inside the guard in this draft. And I think it's one of the big, storylines as the first round plays out, and then deeper into the draft too, is like, if you're taking a lineman, where do you view him as? Do you view him as a tackle? Do you view him just as a left tackle? Can they play the right side? Can they play inside? Can they how are we going to see these guys fit in? Because I think, just going around and seeing what the analysts are saying, like some guys say, play him a tackle, and other ones are saying, no, this, player X has to be inside. So I think it's one of the fascinating things about this draft is what guys are going to actually stick at tackle. But one guy I think can, and a lot of people are saying he should be a guard, but I think you put him at tackle and just leave him alone there. And if he shows he can't do it, then I think he'll move inside and be a very good guard. That's Troy Fountain from Washington. To me, the only sticking point with putting him at tackle is that he's a little bit under 6'4". So he'd be shorter, but he has the length. His arms are over 34 inches. So he makes up with it for arm length. He plays with that.
Zach Tom is 6'4", isn't he?
Yeah, Zach Tom is 6'4". Now, I mean, they drafted him in the 4th round, and Goody said that originally he probably thought he'd end up at center or maybe even guard, and now he's a right tackle. And even Bakhtiari was only a little bit over 6'4". He wasn't a real tall offensive lineman. So Fountain is, to me, like I said, the only sticking point is he's a little bit shorter than you would like at tackle, but he's got the longer arms. He has the athletic ability. He plays nasty. He's very good in the run game. He's very good in the passing game. He plays good with his hands. Really like him. And again, I don't think he'll be there at 25, but there's a chance. And if he were, to me, there would be no hesitation in taking him and putting him at left tackle and letting him and Rasheed Walker compete. Um, so I like Fontenot a lot. Another position that I view as a need, Quinyon Mitchell. We've talked about him a million times. We both love him.
Love that guy.
So I'm going to steal him because I'm going first. I think they need a corner. I think, maybe not a day one starter, but at least competition. I think you take Mitchell. If somehow they were able to trade up and get him, he's a day one starter. But at worst, I think they need at least competition on the outside at corner. To me, Mitchell, again, we've talked about him a bunch. He came from Toledo, so he was kind of like, okay, he's very good at Toledo, but can he prove himself against better teams? And he's been consistent over the last couple of years. He went down and had a great Senior Bowl, tested great at the combine. Like, he's checked every box you could want. I don't think the competition thing should even apply anymore because he's shown it when he's played against good receivers, and he showed it at the Senior Bowl. The athletic ability and the size are all there. I think he's really good. I think he's going to be a really good pro. And I think, whatever team ends up with him, he's going to walk in and be a starter from day one. Love him. I love his mentality. He doesn't back down. He kind of plays with that kind of cockiness, feistiness that you want in a corner. And he has that mindset. Like, I'm the best dude. I don't care where I went to college. Like, doesn't matter. I'm the best corner. And I like that attitude. Love him a lot. And then, another position of need, probably, potentially, is running back. We've talked about them too. And there's really 3 running backs I like, and I think you're going to hit on one of them. So I won't steal your guy there, but I'll take Trey Benson from Florida State. The more I've watched him and the more I've studied him, he's got good size. He tested much better than I thought he would, which is great to go along with the size. He can make people miss. He's very productive at Florida State. They had a really good year too. And yes, they have, a couple receivers who are going to be drafted, and their quarterback will probably get drafted as well. But Benson seemed like really kicked that offense into gear. And, I don't want to say he made him go, but he wasn't taking a backseat to the receivers in the passing game. I think he can catch the ball. He's got a versatility there. And, as far as a fit in Green Bay, I think he could come in and compete and, maybe bypass A.J. Dillon year one. He's not going to be Josh Jacobs, but looking at it down the road over the next couple of years, him and Josh Jacobs together would be a hell of a 1-2 punch. I think he's got the versatility to be like, if they don't want to go smaller at running back, he's not small. He's not Jacobs' size. He's obviously not Dillon's size, but he's not a small back. I think he gives you the ability in the passing game. And I think, he's a 3-down back, just like Jacobs is. So really like Trey Benson a lot. I think he's a 2nd-round pick, most likely 2nd, 3rd-round guy, and a great fit for the Packers. And then just real quick, a couple other guys that stand out to me. And we hit on him last week too when we talked about some cornerbacks. Elijah Jones from Boston College, who's going to be day 3 pick, likely 4th-round guy, Boston College. So he's got the background with Hafley. But even besides that, tested very well. Got really good size. He's a little skinnier. I think he was about 185. So that's a little bit below their threshold. But maybe he played bigger than that. Maybe he got down to, to run faster or whatever at the combine. I don't know. But obviously they're going to have inside information considering his head coach is now the defensive coordinator in Green Bay. But he played a ton of man. He was really sticky in coverage. Like, it's hard to see him just get beat clean. He was there on the ball, and, he played press, but he played everything that Hafley's going to want to play in Green Bay too. So it would be a real easy evaluation, I think, for the Packers. And you can see the athletic ability, the speed, the change of direction show up on tape. I like Elijah Jones a lot as like a day 3 corner. Like, if you don't get one on the first 2 days, I think if you take Elijah Jones in the 4th round, not saying he starts day 1, but I think he is an immediate competition for Carrington Valentine and Eric Stokes. Like, it's not just we're going to bring him in and compete lip service. He's going to come in and threaten their jobs and possibly be, a starter pretty early in his career. I think he's got that ability. So yeah, he's one. And then I'll just throw out kind of like a wild card guy that I like. Don't think, the Packers are necessarily looking here as a position. But defensive lineman Chris Jenkins out of Michigan.
Oh, yeah,
Michigan's got a lot of
pick.
Michigan's got a lot of dudes who are going to get picked. his numbers don't pop off the page, but I think that was kind of more so what he was asked to do. When they needed him in the big moments, he showed up. He's obviously got the bloodlines. His dad, Chris Jenkins, played a long time in the NFL. We know his uncle was Colin Jenkins with the Packers. He's got great size. He's got athletic ability. He's kind of just like I don't know. He looks like a big monster out there is the best way I can describe him. Like he's going to go in there and just wreck things. And if you want him to play the run, he can do that. I think he's got untapped pass rush potential. And again, it's kind of like what he was asked to do at Michigan. Maybe somewhat similar to Rashawn Gary when Rashawn Gary was, hand on the ground. They were moving him inside at times, whereas they weren't really taking advantage of what he had to offer and his athletic ability and pass rush potential, like what he's done in Green Bay. So I'm not saying he's Rashawn Gary, different type of player completely, but I just could see similarities in like they didn't make the most use of his ability. They kind of just said, this is what we want you to do, so play this way. But I think he's got the ability to do a lot more than what he's shown at Michigan. But like Jenkins a lot. Not sure if the Packers are, looking defensive line, but he's definitely one of my guys. So that's, I could go on with a few more, but that's a handful of guys that I like. And I think we're going to overlap at least with some of the positions that we talked about. And I know some of the guys you like, I'll probably like as well, but I didn't want to steal all your thunder there. I think I lost Miles. So, yeah, we lost Miles for the moment. See if we can get him back on. I know he's got some storms coming through where he's at down there in the Dallas area. So I definitely want to hear who, he likes in the draft, who his top guys are. And we know he's Mr. Receiver, being that he was a college receiver. So I'm sure he's going to touch on a couple of receivers that, the Packers may be interested in. And, we've debated some of the safeties, and I think he may have a safety or two that he might like that probably is outside of, the athletic thresholds that the Packers like, but it's somebody who he likes, and these are our guys, and that's what we're talking about, not necessarily who, the Packers may be interested in, but more so in just who we like as individuals in this draft. And there's definitely a few that, I could go on about and talk about guys that maybe, haven't been great testing numbers, but, it's unfortunate because I still would like them. We know what the Green Bay Packers, thresholds have been and what their history has been as far as taking guys that are not great athletes, especially early in the draft within those first, 3 or 4 rounds. They just very rarely will stray from that. And a few times that they have, it definitely hasn't worked out. So history tells you that they should stay within those, relative athletic score numbers, those great testing numbers that they are very interested in with these players, because that's what's paid off for them. And, you want to take great athletes early in the draft. And it's not just a Packer thing. We see it in the first round every year. Like we'll be able to go down through the first round this season, and there's going to be probably very few, if any, guys that are get taken in the first round that are going to be not great athletes. You just don't see it. We can, look at the RAS scores after those first 32 picks come off, and there may be 1 or 2 guys that are under a 9, and that's, non-quarterbacks. Of course, we're not worried so much about the athletic scores of quarterbacks as much as the other positions, but there may only be 1 or 2 guys that end up in the first round that are not plus 9 guys. So it's not just a Packer thing, but probably the Packers stick to it a lot more and a lot more heavily than maybe most teams or typical teams do as far as the athletic numbers. And it's paid off. The proof is there in their draft successes over the years, and then even in some of their failures over the years as well, with some of the guys they've missed on when they've gone outside their thresholds, or when they've taken guys within the first 100 picks that just haven't panned out for them over the years. That Amari Rodgers being one of them. Jay Sternberg was a 3rd round pick, didn't test great. They took a chance on him. obviously didn't work out. So we do want to see the Packers stay, even though it may frustrate some of us where we miss out on some guys that we really like that maybe didn't test so well, or maybe we're a little bit smaller even, because that's also an important detail. So yeah, the more athletic players you can get, the better. And obviously, you want to get them not just, you want great football players, but you want athletic football players. So the more the better. And the Packers have had very good success finding those guys. And I think that's what they're going to continue to do, especially within the first 3 rounds, where they have the extra picks in the second and the third rounds. It's going to be athletic players, and it's going to, be versatile players. If it's offensive lineman, if it's safety, I think it's going to be versatile safety who can do a lot of different things in tandem with Xavier McKinney. So those are the guys to kind of look at. And if they didn't test well, if they're undersized, chances are probably not going to be a Packer. That's just the reality of it. And sometimes, do they miss out on some guys that maybe don't hit their thresholds? Yeah, of course they do. But you got to play the percentages, and usually the percentages are in the Packers' favor to go with those guys who are more athletic, who are bigger, stronger, faster, can jump higher, all those stuff. It's usually in your best interest to go with those type of players and not go outside and make exceptions, because the old saying is you make one exception, pretty soon you're going to start having a team of exceptions, and obviously that's not the way to go either. So we'll see if we can get back on this soon. I know Miles is having some internet issues there. Like I said, there's some storms going through his area, so we might have to put a pause to this and maybe get back later on or another day, see if we can get Miles to be able to hop back on. But a lot of draft stuff still to come. A couple weeks out now and getting closer and closer. Kind of wish it was coming tomorrow at this point. Feel like I got all the info we can possibly have at this point, as all the mock drafts happen and all the what if this happened, all the scenarios are being played out right now. It's kind of gets a little bit overwhelming at times, where it's like, okay, I've seen enough. Like it just becomes noise at that point. So the sooner the better, and it's going to come fast, and it is right around the corner. Very interesting draft for the Packers, and also seeing some of their top 30 visits, or it's not really top 30, they're 30 visits, but I don't want to call it top, because these aren't their necessarily top 30 players. It's their 30 visits that they're allowed to bring in. A lot more of those guys have started rolling in over the last week or so. And it might not even be guys that they're taking. They may bring some guys in just for medical testing. They may bring some guys in to, make other teams think that they're going to draft them, to kind of throw them off. I know Ted Thompson used to do that back in the day, and I'm sure Goody does that too. He wants to put up a smoke screen. It's line season. So, but you can at least see what positions they're bringing in. And it seems like they've brought in a few linebackers, a few safeties, offensive linemen too. So expect those to be the positions that they're targeting. Maybe not even necessarily the players they're bringing in for the visits, but at least those positions that they're going to be targeting. And we have seen over the last, especially the last couple of years with Goody there, he will bring guys in for 30 visits, and he'll draft some of them too. And I know that doesn't sound like this, okay, well, he's going to bring them. Of course he's going to draft them. But Ted Thompson would bring in a lot of guys who were either late round picks or guys who weren't going to get drafted. They were going to be undrafted free agents, because he didn't want anything getting out about who he may be targeting to draft. And he wanted to start recruiting, getting these undrafted guys in the building to meet with the coaches and meet with the personnel staff, so that when a draft was over, they kind of had they had a relationship with them, so they could recruit them to sign with the Packers. So Ted rarely would bring in guys that he would end up drafting, whereas Goody's kind of shifted that, and he does bring in some guys on his 30 visits that he ends up drafting. So could very well see that, come about, where a couple of these guys or a few of these guys that are coming up for the 30 visits end up getting drafted by the Packers. But I think it's more important that, it's nice to see who these guys are and be able to, really do some research on them and say, okay, but, and get the background, and it's great. But I think it's more so important to see what positions are they bringing in. Are there multiple guys coming in at certain spots? And there have been, because that's probably what they're looking at, and those positions that they're looking to target in the draft. So lot more draft stuff to come, and we're certainly, whether we are able to hop back on tonight or later this week, be diving in a whole lot more, topics around the draft, and we'll definitely be hitting on it next week as well, as we, get 1 week closer. We're getting there. We're getting much closer. We're going to have a ton of Packers news to dive into during the draft and coming out of the draft. And, 11 picks right now. I'm not sure they're going to make them all. I think they will, or at least we'll get close to 11. Definitely some trade scenarios on the board as far as moving up and moving down. So it's, Goody's drafts are always interesting. He always keeps us on our toes. Don't expect them to do the thing that's, the things that are out there that a lot of people are predicting. He kind of throws some curveballs along the way. So we'll have a lot to dive into, and hopefully we can get back up and talking together and talking with everybody, interacting here, either later tonight or this week. And if not, we'll definitely be back next week. So thanks for listening in.
Tim,
Hey,
can we still do this?
I literally just ended. But that's
Dang.
okay. Let's keep going.
You had almost 100 people listening to you, man. I was like, no, don't stop.
You threw me a curveball, so yeah, I don't even know what I was saying. Just rambling on about the draft and the Packers. So
Oh shoot, I think we're actually still live now. It looks like it says
we are
live, and end stream is still an option. Hey, welcome back.
Hi.
Here we are. We're flying by the seat of our pants, folks. We're doing a great job, I hope. Props to Tim for just flying solo there for a little while. We've got some storms going through down here, so my internet got knocked off, and we are back. So, Tim, I'm not even sure how much ground you covered while I was gone. Did you move on from our draft guys?
No, I think I was still talking about that. I was rambling on about a bunch of different draft things and trying to fill the time until you got back on and saved me.
Well done, sir. Well done. And if anybody is
So-
hanging out still, jump in the comments, give Tim some love here for carrying that one. But
Yeah.
here we go.
The
Let's
best I could.
let's jump back in. I get to do my draft, guys.
Yeah, it's your turn now.
Come on now. The thunderstorm's trying to take me offline here. Doesn't want me to be heard. I'm not okay with this. Okay, so yeah, as far as my draft guys go, I'll start with the first one because he's actually a little bit more relevant this past week. T'Vondre Sweat was one of my first ones that I just was, when I watched him, I was like, yeah, please put that guy on the Packers defense. He doesn't need to be the guy. He can follow Kenny Clark's lead and TJ Slayton and all these other guys and just fit in there and play the role that he's meant to play, which is an immovable mountain that actually can move around. I think we talked about it. He's like that closest thing to B.J. Raji as we've had. So, unfortunately, he did something stupid this week and got busted down here in Texas for, I think it was a DWI. Very unfortunate, but is what it is. I don't know that will just completely remove him from everybody's draft board. I don't think it will. Certainly, some teams do that, right? Some teams will just take a guy like that totally off the board. The guy will still get drafted, no doubt about it. But
Absolutely. Yeah.
it's interesting to wonder if he's off the Packers board or not. I don't know that I'm 100% certain he is. I think it's easy to assume he is. But again, it's Green Bay. I think the Packers know that. Green Bay is a small town that is not easy to get in trouble in. Most players have talked about that pretty openly. I went to school at Oshkosh down there, not far from Green Bay. I can attest, it's not very easy to get in trouble in those areas. There's just not a whole lot to get into except for, a good local bar. So,
there are a lot of bars and alcohol
there
in Green Bay and Wisconsin, though. So if he's getting a DWI,
plenty of DDs available too, though. Like if you're gonna get out there and have some fun, it's not hard to find somebody to drive you home.
Yeah. Not sure what he was thinking.
Yeah, definitely a knuckleheaded move. I will say, as somebody who's also spent some time in Austin, much easier to find trouble down there. No doubt about it, really. So it's a fun place, wild place, and yeah, I get it. Young, wild, free. It stinks because it's like, yeah, dude, you're like 3 weeks away from changing your life. Like, just hold it in, man. But either way, yeah, he probably cost himself some money, but I think he's still going to find himself an NFL team and, again, be that immovable mountain type guy. So he was one of my first ones. I think he still is. I think he would still be a cool piece to see on that Packers defensive line. I'm not going to make any predictions about where he should be selected, especially after this week. But, if he makes it to around, 3-4 and they pull the trigger on him, I'm going to be excited about it. So, Tavondre Sweat would be my first one there. And then A.D. Mitchell is another one, man. The guy, I think, and we've talked about him a little bit, I think he's not being slept on necessarily. Plenty of people talking about him, but he is being pushed further down the list just because of these exceptional talents ahead of him. He's a guy I could very well see falling to the Packers at 25, and with his athleticism, his size, his route running ability, it's going to be incredibly difficult for the Packers to pass that up. They did have Jermaine Burton in for a 30 visit, not a top 30 visit. We've all been corrected now. Get it right, Packers Twitter, and for the rest of NFL Twitter, for that matter. Yeah. A 30 visit. So one thing that tells me as far as who is Jermaine Burton and how does he compare to A.D. Mitchell, I think that they would both fit into the Packers offense the same way. And it's that type of receiver that we've talked about before, that receiver 4 type who has to be able to fit all other 3 positions, essentially. So chime in, man.
Yeah, couldn't you see, like, for Mitchell, I'm talking about,
yeah,
like, if they were to take a receiver in the first round, which would be completely shocking, and Packer Twitter would be just a circus and chaos, which would be kind of cool to see.
It's like we've been asking for this for years and years, and then you get it, and you're like, oh no.
Right. Like, so, I mean, I'm kind of here for that. That would be pretty cool. But, like, if they were to take a receiver at 25, and obviously, like, forget Harrison and Dunze, Neighbors, wouldn't, like, Mitchell, because of his size, his athletic ability, his route running, like, he would kind of be the guy. Maybe Brian Thomas, if Brian Thomas fell. I think it's more realistic that Mitchell would be. Like, wouldn't Mitchell be their guy? Like, I couldn't see him taking Worthy because he's too light.
Right.
To me, if they're taking somebody at 25 at receiver, Mitchell would be the obvious one.
Yes. And even when you bring up Brian Thomas, I love that guy. I think he's a beast. But he projects as an outside guy, like that X receiver, maybe that Z receiver. He's not going to do as much in the slot, not because he can't, but just because his value is out there where he is just going to be a nightmare for cornerbacks, right? And he's big, he's fast. You want to get that guy downfield. He's not going to spend as much time in the slot. The Adonai Mitchell or Jermaine Burton type that, and they're both around. Adonai Mitchell's a little taller, 6'2", 205. Burton's, 6 foot, right, closer to 200, maybe like 195. So Donnie Mitchell's a little bit bigger, but they're that same type of receiver, which is a very versatile receiver, right? You can win outside because you have the speed and enough size, but you can also move into the slot and be used as a weapon in a lot of different ways because of that speed and agility, that horizontal movement that these guys have. And Donnie Mitchell, the explosion is another thing that you can't overlook. A 39.5 vertical jump that's a big vertical jump, especially for a 6'2" dude. He is getting up there. But his broad jump is 11.4. Like that is exceptional. That is elite explosiveness. Like this guy he can explode out of the gym. You're going to be able to use him in a lot of ways. And when he's young in his career, returner might be one of those ways too, with the speed that he's got. So that one is one that I think is very interesting. They did meet with him at the Combine. And now that they have had Burton in as a 30 visit, it tells me that they are willing to take that type of receiver in the right spot. Now, Burton, I think, is somebody who ends up a little bit further back, maybe second or third round. I don't think he's a first-round guy. But, again, I'll tell you how much I hate trying to project that. I could be very wrong about that. But we're talking about the type of guy that these guys are right now. And that body type, that receiver type, they're both pretty similar. Burton's also a speed guy. I think that really tells you they are willing to add another dude in that capacity. I don't think it's going to be in the capacity of like a bigger type of guy, somebody that would be fun like a Xavier Leggett or the Brian Thomas if he were to fall, just because that guy is going to end up being number 2 behind either Dobbs or Watson. Now, certainly we've seen injuries happen, and, that guy becomes number 1 real quick, no doubt about it. But I think if you are going for that value that soon, you've got to be getting somebody who is going to move all over your offense. In my opinion, that's the room that's left in the offense. There's really, you got your size from your tight ends and from Christian Watson. You've got speed from across the board. Jaden Reed, Dobbs are fast. All these guys are fast. Really, the only thing you could do is maybe, like I said, get a better version of Jaden Reed, which is what Adonai Mitchell is. That's about it. That's the room that's left. So I really like that guy. I think in another draft he's not getting out of the top 15, maybe top 10. But this is an exceptional receiver draft, so he is going to fall, and that's where I think that you need to watch for Goot to make a move like that, because that's where you get a case for that guy being best player available over somebody else who, Packers Twitter, we like to talk about and think about the needs of the team, the Graham Bartons of the world, or, these types of guys. And certainly DeJean is one who comes up, having his pro day today. But it comes down to who do they think is the best player available. I think it's an interesting conversation maybe to have between DeJean and Adonai Mitchell. I think that is a tough conversation to have. But that's where you end up with a potential receiver in the first round from the Packers. So he's one that I really like from that scenario. Very realistic that could happen. And I think that would be a really exciting piece for the future of the Packers receiver core. You got to expect one thing, that the guys they have right now, not all of them are getting a second contract. So I think that you're going to also have that mindset coming from Goot to say, one of the guys coming out of this draft could be the next man up when whoever it is doesn't get a second contract. So then you're looking at, all right, well, it could be a guy who fits in one position or a guy who fits in 3 positions. Your odds are better with the guy who fits in 3 positions. So, yeah, that's why I would, justify him as one. Another one that I'm, really like talking about, and the more I watch and the more I talk about him, the more I like him and hope that the Packers get him wherever they deem him worthy, is Cam Kitchens. And I know that a lot of guys bailed on him because of his combine scores. His pro day definitely improved over the combine scores. Still not, passing that Ross score threshold. I don't think that matters. And I don't know that you can say that a lot. We said that about Jaden Reed last year, and that ended up being right. I think in this case with Cam Kitchens, and I can't think of the exact video or the exact interview or whatever it was, but I'm pretty sure Goot has already said as much. There are certain guys that the athleticism doesn't matter, because on film you don't see athleticism as a liability. You don't, or you see athleticism as an asset. That's what I was looking for there. Kitchens is one of those that I can't find it. I can't find where he got beat because he was too slow or couldn't jump high enough. And, if you look at the other areas of his score that hold him back, it's his size, and his size is really not that bad. He's not tiny. And then the other thing is his bench press, which I think he had like 13. That's not bad. Like, you don't need your safety to be benching the school, so and he doesn't have athletic measurement. So you don't have the shuttle, what's the other one? The 3-cone. There's certain measurements that he might actually have some more elite level testing at that are not on the board there. So with him, he's one that I just don't see that it matters. There's not a single play, and I haven't watched all the plays. So if you're listening to this and you're going, oh, no, I saw him get beat by this team or this guy, please bring it forward, jump in the comments, hit us up on Twitter, whatever it may be. Tell us. I mean, that's what this kind of forum is for, really. Let's talk, Packers fans. But I haven't seen it. And there's some other folks who agree with me on Twitter, and they have watched more film than I have. Mr. Watson is one of them. He's agreed with me a few times on this. Christian Watson's dad. And that's where I'm like, if you watch the guy and you don't know his test results, he's that guy. In my opinion, he's that guy. He is a field general. He's out there every single play. He's communicating with his guys, getting them on the same page. And one thing that stands out to me, and I haven't had a good enough look to say that this is better than all the other safeties. So again, if I'm just wrong, definitely let me know, guys. I'm not claiming to be all knowing here, but his play recognition, the time that it takes him to figure out what's going on, seems elite to me. Like he picks it up quick, sometimes almost too quick, where he overruns the play. And that's where you can give him a knock, is he'll do things where he's overly aggressive and take poor angles because of it. Man, that's easy to coach out. Like, you get him some guys around him, that'll disappear pretty quick. What's not easy to coach is the timing of that play recognition. That's kind of like the equivalent of a quarterback in their release time. Like Aaron Rodgers, one of the things that makes him so great as a thrower of the football, his decision-making is elite, but his release time, and you guys have all seen it, I'm sure, on when they do it on the games with all their advanced analytics and all this stuff, is he just whips that ball out of there, man. As soon as he makes the decision where it's going, it's gone. There's, and to draw the opposite comparison, Tim Tebow, the big knock on him is he had like this crazy wind up, right, and then he threw it eventually. It was like this, dang, man, chill out, get that ball out of there. So that's with Cam Kitchens, man. When you watch him, he recognizes the play so fast and moves immediately accordingly. That's the guy I want back there. I don't care if he's the biggest, strongest, or fastest as far as physics goes. His mind works very, very fast, and that is very hard to coach. So that's another guy that the more I watch him, the more I want him, and I'm not here to argue with anybody about where he should go because I don't know and don't really care. I just hope that the Packers find him where they feel that he is the right pick, whether that be the second, third round. I don't think it'll be the first round, but I do think that he'll go higher than most media has projected. But hey, I got a long-winded there, Tim. Am I off base here? You got to keep me honest.
No, these are your guys. So if that's who you like, that's who you like. I mean, the Kitchens one will be fascinating because he doesn't have that, athletic score, the testing numbers that we're used to seeing the Packers pick. They do occasionally go off of that. Sometimes it doesn't work out so good, though. But if he's a guy that falls maybe fourth round, maybe that's what – I mean, they also have an extra third-round pick. Maybe they just like him enough and say, you know what? We like him enough on the field. We're not going to necessarily ignore the testing numbers, but we feel like he's a good enough player. We see the fit with McKinney. We think he can be better than what his testing show. We think he's just an instinctive player who can cover a lot of ground, even though, he didn't run the greatest 40 and some of his other numbers were poor. They may take a chance. You don't know. Honestly, I think it's not likely. But they do have, like I said, the extra third. And if he falls, fourth round, then it kind of, the further they go in the draft, the more they kind of get away from all these athletic numbers. They do take more chances on guys. So maybe he's a guy like that does fall because of, the poor workout that he had at the combine, where it turns other teams off. And, they end up saying, you know what? Yeah, he tested poorly, but, we're sitting here in a fourth round, or even if he got in, later than that. And they're going to take a shot on him and say, we like the film better than obviously what we saw at the combine and his pro day, but we like the film a lot. So we're going to rely on that and just take a shot on him. So I think that scenario would be possible. I have a hard time seeing him picking him in, the second round, or maybe even in the third round at all. But I get what you're saying. The film looks a lot better, obviously, than the workouts. And it's strange that he tested that poorly, because I don't see it when I see him on film. I see a better football player than what he tested as athletically.
Yeah, I do too. And that's where I think that, you have guys like Goot in the scouting department that they'll make that exception. And what I will say he looks similar to is a former Packers safety that some were hoping might even return this past offseason. Or this offseason, I should say, Micah Hyde, right? Wasn't the fastest, wasn't the most athletically gifted. I think he had like a 33-inch vertical, something like that, very pedestrian, and turned out to be a pretty damn good safety in the league still, So that's where I would say is, like, athleticism is not everything at that position. It certainly helps, don't get it wrong. But there have been some guys who are not the freak athletes that have done very well at the position. So Cam Kitchens is one that I think that when you got a guy like that who, he's communicating a lot with his team before and after the play, whatever happened, he was always right there, breaking it down with his guy. He's first in their ear to say, hey, what happened, or good job, or whatever it is. And you can see him breaking it down before the play. He's pointing things out, getting guys in position. And, some of those guys get beat, right? Some of those corners get beat. Miami's defense wasn't invincible. But it's very rarely because they were out of position, and that's what I would say is, like, it seems like he's the reason. Now, there's some good coaching down there, I'm sure. There's also, another safety back there that is coming out in this draft that a lot of people like, probably a few picks later than Kitchens. But, he's a guy that if you put him back in your defense and he is what he looks like as far as the leadership qualities go, man, that's a guy that could lift the entire defense for years to come. And that's what these guys learn in these interviews. Like, that's the things that don't show up on your Ross scores or, at the combine, at least on the TV, right? It's in the interviews. It's kind of behind the scenes where you figure out, how much does this guy know ball? Is he recognizing these plays as quickly as it looks like he is? And is he just guessing, or, is he watching a lot of film and knows what he's looking for? Now, a lot of people on Twitter are accusing him of just guessing a lot. And the more I look at it, the less guessing I see. I don't see a player who's guessing it much. Like I said, he's a player who will get beat for being overly aggressive. He'll take poor angles, but usually it's because he knows what's going on very, very soon. So anyway, Cam Kitchens, one of my guys. I do hope the Packers take him wherever they deem him worthy, and we'll see. But, there's a few safety prospects out there that I know that the Packers Twitter is really excited about. One guy we talked about last week, Trey Taylor, he's one that, if the Packers take him, you got to be excited about that too. Thorpe Award winner. That's not nothing. So yeah, there's a lot of guys that are going to be available where Packers have picks. So I think that it'll be exciting to see who they take, regardless of who it is. And then the last guy that I've got here on my Your Guys list, this is another one that I think the Packers will have a chance to take. It's kind of a fun one to think about. Jalen Wright. Just a home run waiting to happen. And, I don't know how high you'll have to go to get him. I do think because of his top-end speed, he probably will go a little bit higher than the media and the fans think he probably should. but he fits well in the Packers offense because when I watch him, I see a guy that if he has to be running back number one and he has to carry the offense, he's not going to thrive as well. If he can be that change of pace guy, that kind of looming home run threat that comes in to spell a Josh Jacobs, that's, you got the defense kind of tired on a 10-play drive, and then you got that guy coming in with fresh legs. That's the kind of guy I think could be a lot of fun with his speed, and you get his speed combined with the other speed that's there on the offense like Christian Watson's, and you got a lot of nightmarish horizontal movement for a defense to deal with. So, yeah, jump in, man.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say he would be a great compliment to Jacobs and Dillon, really, with the speed and the home run ability where he can break off long runs like that. And I agree. Like, I don't think he's an every down, 20 carry a game back or anything like that, but he can certainly fill the role. And, he can make you pay anytime he gets the ball with the speed he has. I like him a lot. It'll be interesting to see where he goes because probably most of the teams are going to have the running backs ranked differently because there's just like no top guy or top couple guys. It's kind of like all over the place. I mentioned Trey Benson. You're mentioning, right? I like them both. I like Jonathan Brooks. Like any of those three guys, I'd be more than happy to see the Packers draft. And then there's a few more too. But it'll be interesting, like when they start coming off the board and what order, like how do these teams like certain guys? Because maybe Wright's the first back off the board. It's possible. But he could also be like, down the line, he might be the fifth back off the board. You don't know. It's the pecking order there at running back is kind of like wide open.
It really is.
I like him a lot. I think, especially Jacobs is an every down back. Not that the Packers are going to play him every down. They love to rotate, which is fine. But I think Jacobs coming out of the game and you putting Wright in there, it would just be such a nice compliment with his speed and his ability to break off big runs.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree, man. And that's where I wonder how this will all play out, and I'm glad it's not our job to predict because it's not easy. And it really does come down to, some psychology across the GMs, who's thinking what, who's valuing what. And we had Coach Budiak on, shout out to Justin Budiak last week. And he said a lot of the same thing. And he had a chance to coach Braylon Allen in high school. So we asked him about Braylon Allen and what he thinks of that. And he said essentially the same thing. It comes down to what do these teams value? Where do they value them? What are they looking for? Because if you're looking for a Jalen Wright, you're probably not looking for a Braylon Allen. They're very different types of running backs. Both seem like they're going to have good NFL careers, but just totally different styles of guy, and your organization is going to value according to at least somewhat what you need. So, do the Packers need a Braylon Allen? It's kind of hard to say that now that you've got obviously Josh Jacobs is not a small guy, but you brought back A.J. Dillon. If he's available in the right spot, could you bring him in hoping that he beats out A.J. Dillon and becomes what we're hoping A.J. Dillon to be? Maybe. Then I think that you're probably looking at a player who's picked later on, right? Day 2, day 3. Not that Braylon Allen would be taken day 1 anyway, but probably more like day 3, like round 4 or later. And that's where it's just it just kind of depends on how these things fall and who values what. So not our place to try to make those calls, but certainly keeps things interesting. It's going to be really interesting to see how the chips fall. I will say one more guy, and I have to do this because he's now we're adopting him with our podcast here because I think that we're going to be responsible for bringing some attention to this guy. But Wayne Ruby out of Mount Union, Ben Fennell from the Senior Bowl, he was out there this week asking for some sleeper recommendations from the Twitterverse. And I threw out our guy Wayne Ruby, and this is not somebody that Ben had seen before. And he was pretty excited about him. Loved the explosiveness that Wayne's got. So shout out to him. He is one of our guys. Most of you probably, if you've listened to us, you've heard his name. But outside of this, you might not have. one of the things that got my attention on Wayne Ruby in 2022, this kid caught 30 touchdowns. All right. Followed it up with a modest 15 this last season. So that's eye-popping on its own, and then the career that he's had at Mount Union has surpassed that of some other NFL or Mount Union great receivers who ended up being pretty good NFL receivers as well. Cecil Shorts, Pierre Garçon, to name those guys. And Wayne Ruby now owns some records that are past them. So, guy to keep an eye on. It's really, really easy to lose track of guys like that in a class like this because the star power is maximum in this class for receivers. But there are going to be guys like that come out. You're not going to know who they are, and they're going to end up on your fantasy team next year because you're like, hot dog, I don't know who the hell this is, but he's putting up points. So shout out to Wayne Ruby. Hope you get drafted, sir. Good luck, and excited to watch you in the NFL because I'm sure that we will. And I doubt that you'll ever listen to this podcast, but if you do, man, jump on. We would love to have you. All right, so let's jump into the real meat of this conversation. We took a little bit longer on our guys than I thought we would, but I kind of enjoyed that segment there. But what we were trying to lead to is like what is a dream draft for the Packers this year? I think that other years it's a little easier to answer that question than it is this year. So I'm going to let you lead off, man, because this is a tough answer.
Well, I mean, I think the dream is like they draft 4 Hall of Fame players, right? Like,
of course.
But the realistic,
why stop that? Why not 5?
Right, 5. They have 11 picks, all 11. No, I'm more think of it like when the draft's over on Saturday, whatever day that is, 27th, 20th. When the draft's over, like you can look at it and be like, okay, here's who they drafted, and is it a certain player you were like, or multiple players you really like, as a position, or what makes you say like, yeah, I'm really happy with what they did. Now, of course, everything's a total unknown. We don't know how these guys are going to do once they get in the NFL, no matter how much we saw them play or what their athletic scores are, or how much film we watch. Like, we have no idea what they're going to be once they get there. But just at that moment when the draft's over, what would make you kind of feel satisfied? So that's how I look at it. For me, I want to see them kind of replenish the depth and the competition, offensive line and in the secondary. I'm hoping for 3 offensive linemen. Reason being, they need the depth, number one. There's hardly any depth right now along the line with guys leaving in free agency. And they need immediate competition at right guard. They could probably use it at center with Josh Myers. I know they like Myers a lot more than Packers fans do, but it'd be nice to see competition, or if not, his contract's up after next season. So you might want to start planning ahead and maybe getting somebody in place, even if they can't compete with him in 2024, maybe be next in line in 2025. And it wouldn't hurt to, give Rasheed Walker competition. As good as he looked the second half of last year, and he looked like a solid left tackle who could be a starter. You still don't know, and it's a small sample size of where he played consistently good football. So at the very least, they need depth and competition, if not immediate starters. That's why I would love to see 3 offensive linemen, whoever they may be. There's guys that I like that I talked about, Fatanwu earlier, and there's a ton of offensive linemen I could get into who I like, but it's not even so much their names. It's just attack that position. You've given Jordan Love weapons with the tight ends they took last year, with the receivers over the last 2 years, bringing in Josh Jacobs when you let go Aaron Jones. Like, there's plenty there, and I'm not saying don't keep adding there, sure, but I think the priority now should be protecting him and putting up a wall in front of him. And then the other position to the attack is the secondary, and I kind of group in corners and safeties here because I think you could use they need another starting safety to go with McKinney. So
for sure,
whether that's in the draft or somebody they pick up after the draft who may become available, and they need at least competition, if not an immediate starter opposite Jair at corner. Jair's had a lot of injuries. 2 of the last 3 years, his seasons have been ruined because of injuries. We know Stokes is coming off, a lost season basically because of his injuries. So do you want to count on those guys being healthy? I guess you could, but they haven't been. So at the very least, you gotta have depth there so that if there are injuries, you have more guys to turn to. And I know Valentine, they held up okay. Um, but if you can get better than that, you need to do it. So yeah, for me, it's end up on Saturday when the draft's over, 3 offensive linemen and at least 2 guys from that secondary. And, whoever the players are, I'll be happy with it if those are 2 positions that they really focus on and focus on attacking.
Nice. Okay. Doesn't sound like it's going to take too much to make you happy.
No, it's not a major,
Okay.
it's not a major thing, I don't think. And it's positions that I expect them to go after heavily.
Well, if you look at where they've had their meetings, whether it be the 30 visits or the combine meetings or Shrine Bowl, Senior Bowl, the secondary is I think probably the biggest position. They've had a lot of meetings in the safety area, and they've had several DBs come in for 30 visits, and they've had meetings with Cam Hart at the senior, or wait, no, not Cam Hart, sorry, Rakestraw at the combine. So yeah, I mean, you're pretty confident that that's where they're looking, right?
Yeah.
For me, I think as far as what does it look like for them to be successful in this draft, one thing I would say that you didn't mention is inside linebacker. I think you need another off-ball linebacker.
Yeah, absolutely.
They did have Cooper in for a 30 visit. They had Wallace in for a 30 visit. Cooper out of A&M, I would love to see them land him. That may be one where they take him at 25 and people are not happy about that because they think that that's a reach. I think if Goot decides that he's worth it at 25, he's communicating something to you. One, that Cooper's worth it at 25, but 2, whatever's behind him is not. So,
right.
Not to say that will happen. I could see it happening, but he is one. I do like Peyton Wilson. I think that the injury concern, you don't want to see that, right? You've obviously brought it up. There's enough injury concerns on this defense. Don't introduce more. Cooper, to me, is a guy that's totally worth that first-round pick because he looks like a guy that you could plug in for the next 10 years at linebacker. And he's mean. He's athletic. He can pass. He can rush the passer. And he's athletic enough to drop back in coverage. I think that would be one, but I think that position has to come away with a guy who is pushing for a starting position in season number 1. Maybe not out of camp. You've got McDuffie, you've got Walker, so you're certainly not in an emergency situation going into camp. But yeah, if you get a Cooper in there, he's pushing both of those guys. Not that he's going to beat out a Quay Walker, but he might beat out an Isaiah McDuffie with athleticism and just sort of impact alone. But that position, I think, has to be addressed. I trust that they will address the safety position, just DBs in general, but it definitely has to be addressed. I think that you can address that more so cornerbacks throughout the draft. I think that day 3, there will be some impact guys there to keep an eye on that, they decide that they're drafting them, their day 3 guys haven't been bad so far. So keep an eye on that. But safety probably needs to be addressed sooner than later because while there are some guys that we've talked about that are certainly worth taking, maybe after round 2 and 3, those pickings get a lot slimmer. That's what I would hope is, address safety earlier than later, address corner where it makes most sense, definitely address inside linebacker. And then I'm still over here on the defense. I'm having a hard time reaching over to the offense as far as what it means to be successful. You definitely need to find some O-line help, whether that be interior or the tackle spot. But they've demonstrated the ability to do that throughout the draft. So round 1, round 7, don't care. Find your guys. The guys that they deem to be the guys have worked more often than not. You're not going to be 100%, so hopefully they take a few shots. But overall, there's some guys that I'd like to see them take on the interior defensive line. I'd like to see, like I've already mentioned, Sweat, but, Christian Boyd is one that they've met with multiple times out of Northern Iowa. He's a big dude. I would love to see them add more to the defensive line for sure. Edge rusher is kind of the last priority, I think, based on two things, right? The Packers have a lot invested in their current edge rushers, but also this is not a huge edge rusher class. There's some depth, there's some ability, right? There's some decent guys, but just not a real star-powered class. So do you need to take another edge rusher out of this class for this to be a successful draft? I don't know. I don't think so.
You might not need to, but it would be nice to have.
For sure. Yeah, and that's where it's like, hey, trust how it falls. If for some reason, Latu falls to them and he's, best player available and they take him wherever that may be, 25 or somewhere else, great. That guy looks like a monster. I just, when we're talking about what does it mean to be successful in this draft for the Packers, I don't think edge has to be part of that equation. You've got some good edge pieces already. There's probably some guys you can add as undrafted free agents. There's, if you really have to, there's probably some free agents out there that you could bring in for depth. So I just don't see that being a position that they need to address in this draft for it to be a successful draft. But yeah, turning over to the offensive side of things and the position that we're supposed to talk about today, I think the least is the lowest priority, which is tight end, even lower than quarterback. Because they've teased the idea of taking a quarterback. But yeah, so tight end, I think you don't need to take a tight end in this draft for it to be successful. You don't need to take a quarterback here to be successful. You really don't even need a receiver for this to be a successful draft. Although I think that it'll be impossible for them to make it out of this draft without receiver being the best position or best player available when they're up to pick. But do you have to get a receiver out of here for this to be a successful draft? No. Yeah. I think you covered it. You need to have multiple picks on the O-line. Again, 1 through 7, don't care. Just multiple picks on the O-line. Wherever it makes sense, and they've been good at identifying that. And then, throw everything else at the defense, I guess. I think really we agree you got to have safety addressed, and you've got to have inside linebacker addressed. You come out with 2 good solutions, if not more than that, at those 2 positions. I think whatever else you do in the draft will be great. And that's with the assumption kind of built in that O-line will be part of that. But when you've got 11 picks, I don't think they'll come out. Here, let's do a more broad stroke. Mm-hmm. You need to come out of this draft with less than 11 players, I think, for it to be successful. You don't have room on this roster for 11 rookies. So, maybe. And I'd say, I guess, before to this question, quality over quantity. Go out there and find a way to consolidate some of these picks, move up, get the players that you really identify that you want or maybe that there's value in. And don't necessarily try to have 3 shots in the 7th round or something like that. So, quality over quantity, I think, is what you need for this to be a successful draft with those 3 positions. Safety, linebacker, and O-line being the ones that you need to address. So,
yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, going back to linebacker, they definitely obviously need bodies there, just from a number standpoint, a depth standpoint, but bigger picture, they need a starter most likely. I mean, I think McDuffie did some good things last season when he played a lot of football because of the injuries to Devondre Campbell, and Quay Walker missed some time too. So he ended up playing a decent amount. I think there's some flashes there and some, positives that he has as a player, and also a new system. He may fit better to the new scheme that, Hafley's bringing in. So I don't think it's the worst thing in the world if he starts off training camp and he's, starting next to Quay Walker. But you at least need a third guy, and you need competition for him, if not an outright starter. And I'm with you. I'm a big Edgerrin Cooper guy. He would be my top guy. But there's some other guys. Junior Colson from Michigan I like too, and I think he would kind of fit pretty well with Quay Walker, where he could be that middle linebacker, that signal caller, more of a steady presence and allow Quay to just, use his athletic ability and go out there as the will linebacker and, hair on fire, not have to worry about anything else. Junior Colson will be there to kind of clean things up for him. But yeah, linebacker, offensive line, secondary, to me, are the top positions. And again, like they don't need a tight end. They don't necessarily need a receiver. And even if they come out of the draft without a running back, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world because they have 2 and maybe 3 if you include Manuel Wilson. And there's always, running back's a position you can always find. So I don't think it's a huge priority. I expect them to take one, but I don't think, it's one of those positions where if they're time to pick and it's not the best player and they, the guys they like keep going before they pick, I don't think you force it and just take a running back to take one. I think they're okay there.
Right.
But they definitely do need offensive linemen, linebackers, and, guys in the secondary. I mean, the safety position, other than McKinney, Anthony Johnson Jr. showed some flashes, but
we don't know.
We don't know anything.
Mark.
Right. Yeah. I mean, other than McKinney, they don't have a safety right now that you want playing, other than special teams.
Right.
So that's a position that has to be addressed.
Yeah. I think that'll be an interesting one because I still don't rule out the possibility for them to trade for another safety. But I think, and maybe, maybe this is the case. Maybe they're just as interested or curious or in the dark about what other GMs are thinking about the safety class, what their perspective is, who's ranked where. I think it really is tough to see, this guy is definitely better than that guy in this class.
Yeah. It's similar to running backs, where I think you could probably talk to all 32 teams and they're going to have them ranked differently. And some guys, are going to be ranked much higher than other teams have. Like,
right.
I think receiver, you can point to like the top guys and they're going to be the top guys for most teams. Right. But safety, I think it's going to be all over the place.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where, if there is another move to be made, I would say it's either made in the draft. Like say, hey, there's one guy that if we can get that guy, that'll be the guy. But if we can't, all right, now we need to go on to plan B, which is trading for, one of these guys that are out there on a roster right now. So that's where I think we'll get a lot of answers, but you gotta let the cards fall. So we'll see how that goes. Let's, we're a little over an hour here now. We're just gonna keep going because we had the weather delay and there's several of y'all still hanging with us. So we're just gonna keep plowing through this episode and talk about the tight ends because this is not a very deep topic we have to get into, but there are some that I think are worth talking about that be kind of, fun, interesting fits with the Packers. Obviously, they've got their top 2 tight ends right now in Musgrave and Kraft, so there's really not a conversation to be had about somebody coming in and challenging those 2 for snaps or targets. I think really what you should be watching for now is, if the Packers do end up taking a tight end, is that H-back type. So a guy who can be used in the offense with a little bit more utility, more of like a Mercedes Lewis, maybe more of a blocker, more of a, just sort of a piece to position here and there and sneak them around every now and then. But there's a few guys, like that aren't your stereotypical tight end or NFL tight end these days that might have the Packers' attention later on in the draft. So, the obvious top one is Brock Bowers, right? Now, one question I should ask about this, Tim, get your thoughts. Is Brock Bowers really that dude, or is he just the only bright spot in a bunch of pedestrians?
I think it's a little of both. Like, okay. There's nobody. The drop off after him is pretty steep. I think he's really good and the potential to be one of the best tight ends in football, especially as a pass catcher. I don't see him having like the all-around game as a blocker, as an inline tight end as some of the other guys like a George Kittle. He kind of reminds me of Sam Laporta, who just had a great season with the Lions. But yeah, he's really good. It's a poor class for tight ends. Be happy that the Packers got Musgrave and Kraft last year. But yeah, I like Bowers a ton. I wouldn't take him in the top 10, but I don't think there's really any tight ends, and if we can, go through the years that I would take at that time in the top 10, just
It's a
because of the
small
positional,
bunch.
yeah, just because of the positional value of it.
Right, right.
But yeah, I think he's really good. As far as a pass catcher over the middle of the field, like you can just see him on crossers, running up the seam. Like he runs away from guys. He knows how to separate. He knows how to get free and run routes like a receiver. He's really good. I don't know if his blocking will ever be anything other than average, but if he's going to be that good in the passing game, you really don't need it to be.
Yeah.
And you get him in the right offense with the right play caller, the right scheme, he's going to put up some numbers for you. And like I said, he reminds me of Sam Laporta and what he looked like with the Lions. And I think Laporta got in, with Ben Johnson, and they made perfect use of him. So I kind of see that Bowers being able to do that too. But after that, I think for the Packers, it's not a priority. What they would be looking for, I would think, is maybe somebody to play the role that they were hoping Josiah DeGuara could have filled, like that do everything H-back motion guy, line him up at fullback sometimes, use him in the passing
maybe
game.
more appropriately described as the Kyle Juszczyk role. I think I said that. Juszczyk?
Juszczyk. Fullback, yeah.
Like Kyle Juszczyk role.
Yeah, like a multi-dimensional tight end that he's not even really going to be necessarily your classic tight end. He's going to be a move guy,
right,
and somebody that you can LaFleur really likes him, and you're going to say, here's your toy to play with, LaFleur, and you find the best use of him and draw up cool plays and formations with him,
exactly.
And where you can put him on the field with Musgrave and Kraft and, present different looks to defenses. I think that
packages stuff.
I think that would be what they would be looking for, unless they kind of want, a blocking guy who can be competition with Ben Sims and Tyler Davis. But it's slim pickings. I think there are a couple guys who could be intriguing to them that they could find roles for. But I'd be kind of surprised if they took a tight end, unless it was, a late day 3 guy who they're taking a flyer on.
Well, and that's the type of guy I think that makes the most sense for them. And there are a couple that I've picked out. Jaheim Bell is one out of Florida State. He's a little undersized, 6'2", 6'3", depending on where you look, about 240. He's interesting because if you look at his PFF rating, he's actually gone down year after year. From 2021, he had an 85. 12th tight end in college football, and then he went down to a 73 or a 76 and then a 73. Not terrible, still pretty solid ratings, but that's the kind of guy that we've talked about before, where it's like maybe he's had his best season before this most recent season, so it gets a little bit overlooked, but he's a capable guy, has a lot of snaps under his belt, little undersized, still a decent athlete. If you look at his combine, he's got a 4.6 40, 35-inch vert, 10.4 broad jump. It's a good explosion. Guy's an athlete. So, that's one that I think you could get him day 3, and he could fit in well in a complementary role. Yeah. Another one that might make sense and closer to a Mercedes Lewis kind of role than the Jaheim Bell role. But Tip Raymond out of Illinois, dude is huge.
Yeah,
he's
like
big dude. 6'6", 270. Let's get the official combine weights here, because that they get nitpicky at the combine. You'll get it right. Dude is huge.
I see 271, 6'4.5".
Okay, 6'4", 271. And if you watch him, he can run routes. So this is like an offensive tackle for you that can run routes.
His workout numbers were really good. I mean, a 9.92 RAS score.
Yeah, I mean that's
so he's got some athletic ability in there.
That's what I mean. He's a big dude, but he's not just a big dude. You know, I'll pull up his combine numbers here. But yeah, you know, he runs a 4.6. A 270 guy running 4.6 is pretty damn good on his 40, but his 10-yard split is 1.55. That's better than a lot of the receivers. So 1.55, that's quick off the line. 33.5 vert, again, at 270, pretty damn good. 10'1" broad jump, pretty damn good. So, you know, 28 bench press reps. I mean, he's up there with the O-lineman on that. This is an offensive lineman that can run routes. This is a guy that, you know, round 5, round 6, might make sense. Right. You plug him in there. He's a complement to the guys you already got who are very much, you know, playmakers, speedsters. They're not necessarily doing all the dirty work. Not that they can't. But a guy like this would be a lot of fun to have, and I don't think would cost a premium pick. So someone to keep an eye on for sure. But I think
I'll give you one.
Okay, yeah. No, go ahead. Hit me with another one.
Yeah, out of Kansas State, Ben Sinnott.
Yes.
Who's got yeah. And I think he's more like the move tight end. He can play some fullback. He can, you know, be your H-back. He's what the DeGuara role was supposed to be that he never really, you know, lived up to. But he, you know, tested really well. He's got decent size, 6'4", 250. Ran really well. The shuttle and 3 cone were exceptional for a dude that big at tight end. So he plays nasty. I think he can play fullback if you wanted to make him a full-time, you know, Kyle Juszczyk. But he's more so like you can put him in that role. You can make him an H-back. Like he would be kind of the chess piece for LaFleur's offense. But yeah, I like him a lot. Probably like a 3rd to 5th round pick. If they, you know, I don't know if they'd go 3rd round on a tight end or that kind of player, but DeGuara was a 3rd round pick. But yeah, I think he'd be a really fun fit to see how LaFleur could use him in the offense.
Yeah, I mean, he's another one. Sneaky athleticism here. A 40-inch vertical, man. 40-inch vertical at 250. That's something. And just to you know, make a comparison, again, Ben Sinnott is 250. His 10-yard split is 159. Our guy Tip 155. 20 pounds heavier. So that's what I'm saying.
It's crazy.
Tip's moving. Tip's getting off the line. You know, in run blocking schemes and you know, concepts, that's valuable. Yeah, so there's some guys that, you know, the star power's not there, but as far as the tight end position goes, there are guys that could come in year one and have a place in an offense. You know, maybe they're not somebody worth your fantasy football draft, so that's not this podcast. We'll get into fantasy football maybe in a little bit and, you know, have a segment about it, but that's not really what we get into. But these are guys that could come in, especially with an offense like the Packers where you're not trying to fill a bunch of holes. Now you really truly are introducing complementary guys, like we talked about with the running back, like we talked about with the 4th receiver, like we talk about here now with the tight end, the 3rd tight end. It's a luxurious place to be, by the way. But these guys can make a big difference. It's a big difference. When your tight end 3 is making a crucial catch or a crucial block in the offense, that's a big deal. You know, and we could go down the line talking about that. What you got? Any other tight ends you want to point out? I felt like there was at least one more that was worth. Well, your guy Theo Johnson out of Penn State.
Yeah, Penn Stater. I think he'd be kind of different than the guys we've talked about. He'd be more of a traditional tight end. The athletic ability it's crazy. I mean, he's one of the most highest RAS scores of anyone at any position in this draft, which is kind of crazy. I liked him at Penn State. He was kind of underutilized in the passing game, but when they would throw him the ball and get it to him, you could see, he can move, good in the open field. The athletic ability showed up. It didn't show up to quite the level that he tested at. That was kind of, eye-opening. Like I said, they didn't make great use of him at Penn State, which is, if you're a fan of Penn State, it's not that surprising. But I don't think, I think he's a nice pass-catching, complementary tight end in the NFL. as a future pro. I like him. I don't know with Musgrave and Kraft if there's a great fit there for him. I think he's got to be involved in the passing game to be effective. He does show a little bit of ability to block, and he's got good size. So I think he has that ability to do that. And he may be one of those guys that's just kind of like under the radar, a hidden gem who, gets the NFL and he's a better player and puts up better numbers in the NFL than he was able to in college. And it's, kind of outside of his control because they just didn't go to him enough. And he was effective when they did go to him at Penn State. But for whatever reason, he just kind of got lost in the shuffle there. But I could see him having a better NFL career than a college career. The athletic ability, though, that was crazy how some of his numbers that he put up. So credit to him. He probably raised his draft stock and might go a little bit higher in a draft than previously thought.
Yeah. No, I mean, his size and his athleticism are pretty impressive. So
yeah.
If the case is just that he was underutilized at Penn State because of scheme or whatever the case may be, yeah, that's another one that he could go earlier than media or fans think, because an offensive coordinator and insert offense had good meetings with him, likes the personality. Obviously, it's hard not to like the athlete. If production's the only thing that was a problem and you can explain that, there's a lot to like there. So that's what's interesting is, the teams really have the information about these guys that they're making decisions on. And that's what could be kind of funny is, right, they're seeing all these mock drafts. The teams watch all these things, maybe not all of them, but they see some of them. And there's probably guys where it's like, this guy has been mocked to this team, over and over and over. Graham Barton to the Packers over and over and over. And that team's just watching that going, man, we took him off our board entirely. These guys are nuts. Not that the Packers would take Graham Barton off their board, but just that happens. So we don't have that information, and that drives a lot of this stuff and how these decisions get made. But we have shown in the past these 30 visits make a lot of difference, or at least are a great indicator on who these guys want to pick. So I'll just go down the line and mention some of these that we've learned about so far. This may not be all of them. These are the ones that I've tracked so far, though. So we got Jermaine Burton, receiver out of Bama. We got Gaitan, the tackle out of Oklahoma. Got Zinter, the guard out of Michigan. Boyd, D-tackle out of Northern Iowa. Hall Jr., Ohio State. Also a D-tackle. Cooper, as we mentioned, linebacker out of A&M. Wallace, linebacker out of Kentucky. Jones, corner out of Florida State. Shepard, corner out of Maryland. And Green, corner out of Florida State. So 2 Florida State dudes here. And then 1 safety so far, Oladapo, I believe that is Oregon State. Is that correct?
I'll give you a couple more. Yeah, he's Oregon State.
Gotcha. Yeah, throw him out there, man.
So Kool-Aid McKinstry was in there today.
That's right.
With Burton and with the running back, Ray Davis from Kentucky.
That's right. I did see that.
Another DB, Omar Brown from Nebraska. He's probably like a late round guy or undrafted. They had that Amarius Mims in, the monster offensive tackle from Georgia.
Right.
He was in. And then Tyron Hopper, who's a linebacker from Missouri, probably a day 3 guy. But he would be an interesting fit too. He's one of the other, linebackers we probably should have hit on, but I could see them taking him on day 3. And then Chris Edmonds, who was a safety from Arizona State. And I think you got all the other ones. So Those are the ones I've seen.
So I'll tell you what, we'll try to take a look at these guys. Some of them we have talked about. We know about, like Mims and some, like McKinstry. Yeah. Some of these guys we have certainly called attention to, and you all have probably heard enough about them. Some of these others that we haven't heard as much about or talked as much about, Zinter, for example, a guard out of Michigan. I think he's one worth looking at. We'll take a look at these guys and give a little commentary on them next week. Maybe not necessarily the guys that we've already talked about, but There's a few of like Oladapo from Oregon State. I haven't really looked at him much. He's one that I'd be curious to look at a little bit closer.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we'll try to do that and bring some of that 30 visit commentary next week for these guys as we get closer. Because again, the last couple drafts, these 30 visits have been very very good indicators of who they want to pick.
It's funny. I was saying the same thing when we were having some internet issues and you were out. So yeah, how good he's bringing some guys in that he does end up drafting. Whereas Ted Thompson, he pretty much only brought in guys that were going to be undrafted that he could start, getting a relationship with to recruit, try to sign them after the draft. So yeah, it's and the other part of it is they might be bringing in a bunch of guys at certain positions that they're targeting, maybe not even necessarily those exact players, but you got to really focus on what positions are they, bringing in a lot of. And so far, it looks like offensive line, cornerback.
Yep. Now, and one thing that I was thinking about along those lines, they brought in Jermaine Burton and Kool-Aid McKinstry. So both Bama guys, both kind of higher prospects in this draft process, both played against each other a lot in practice. Right. So if you're trying to learn something about one or the other, that's a good way to do it, because I was thinking about it, I was like, well, Burton, who did he play against that we can look at, the DBs? And I'm like, well, shoot, he's got these guys on his team that are, top cornerback prospects here in this draft that he practiced against all the time. So if you're trying to learn something about one of those two guys, even Burton's a good one to talk to. So you're absolutely right. These visits don't necessarily mean that's their guy, but it is a good indication of where they're looking. So keep an eye on that. Like I said, we'll dive into that list a little bit harder next week. And then next week we're going to do our QB debate, right? We're going to see if we can take a swing at this QB class.
Yeah, sure.
So maybe the Bears fans ought to listen to next week's episode.
And the Vikings fans.
They might learn something. They're not very familiar with what good quarterbacks look like unless they're beating them. So anyway, we'll stop taking shots at Bears fans because they still suck. The Bears still suck. Some of their fans are actually pretty cool. You just make questionable decisions. It's fine. We forgive you. But, Packers fans, thank you so much for hanging with us this week through our weather delays that we dealt with. I think I've actually got more storms rolling in, so hopefully we don't lose internet. But if we do, we've gone an hour and a half in here and given you a lot of great draft content. So I hope you did enjoy. Hope you do enjoy. Hopefully you still are enjoying. If you are, please spike that like button for us. Give us a follow. Subscribe to the Packers Talk YouTube channel. That helps us out a lot. It doesn't cost you anything. It takes you a few seconds. Please hook us up there. And, come back and hang out with us again next week, Packers fans. And we'll see you then. Go, Pack, go.